Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining the Executive Diploma in Financial Strategy virtual event. We are really delighted to see such a great number of you joining today. My name is Sarah Nima. I am the recruitment manager for this program and will be moderating today's session. Okay, so can I have the next slide, please? Perfect. So during the course of today's session, we will hear from Dr. Ken Okumura, the Program Director and Senior Lecturer in Finance here at Tide Business School, University of Oxford. Ken will provide a sample lecture, which will hopefully give you a taster of topics and themes we look at in our Diploma in Financial Strategy, and an opportunity to get a feel of our Executive Diploma's content. This will be followed by a short presentation to the diploma by myself. We are also joined today by two Diploma in Financial Strategy alumni, Maddie Kennedy and Aisha Mahwish from the class of 2018. Maddie and Aisha, we are grateful for your time and contribution today. I'm sure that the attendees are looking forward to hearing your insights and personal experiences on this program. The session should last up to an hour. If you have any further questions after today or would like to discuss your suitability and objectives, then please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be very happy to set up a call or a virtual meeting with you. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, perfect. So now I will hand you over to Dr. Ken Okumura. He will speak about the LVMH Tiffany takeover deal, including its strategy, finance, valuation, and how it was impacted by the pandemic. Ken, over to you. You're on mute.
Let me just share my screen. Can people see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay, let's get going. So I'm going to talk about LVMH Tiffany. The idea is to give you a little feel for the kinds of topics that you would be expected to think about as a during the diploma, and what you'd end up learning on the course. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? What we're going to explain is why it was worth $91 before the deal was done. Then the deal was done, it became worth 135 bucks. And then you can see there are various points during the course of the year when the pandemic hit and people started to worry that possibly the deal wasn't going to be done. So you can see that in March, there is this period when the share price falls. That was when Tiffany's started to see kind of some negative effects associated with the coronavirus outbreak in China. And then there's this period when the share price is below the deal price for 135, and eventually the deal gets done on October 29th and it's worth $131.50. Okay, so what was the deal? The deal was that LVMH approached Tiffany in October of 29 with an unsolicited bid of $120 a share. And so prior to that, it had been trading about $90. So this is basically a 25%, a 33% premium to the $90 that had been trading on just prior to this. Then LVMH got access to Tiffany's books, and they said, ooh, it's worth a lot more. And they offered $135 a share. And the deal was an all-cash offer. What does an all-cash offer tell us? Well, basically, it would suggest that LVMH was quite confident that the deal was worth it. And in February of 2020, the Tiffany shareholders said, "Thank you very much. We will take the $135. Unfortunately, the coronavirus hit, as we all know, and it hit sales. So Tiffany saw sales fall by 45% in Q1 of the year and 29% in Q2, and actually lost $32 million in the first half of 2020. Second half of 2020 is probably going to be worse. LVMH started to what they call slow walk the deal, which is to say that they looked at the numbers and they said, well, maybe we don't want to do this deal after all. Is there a way that we can kind of get out of the deal? And originally it was supposed to be completed on August 24th. But the problem was that LVMH had already committed to buy Tiffany. They had an agreement, and the agreement fell under US law, and specifically under the law of the state of Delaware. And Delaware courts are very, very negative on the idea of people just walking away from deals. And so LVMH was saying, we have a letter from the French government that says we can't do this deal by the drop dead date. The drop dead date is the date at which people can walk away from the deal. And in September, Tiffany actually sued and said, you must complete the deal. LVMH countersued and said, well, actually, we can show that the management of Tiffany's has done a very bad job, because the rule about material adverse event is it can't just be an adverse event. You have to be able to show that the management of the target company has done a worse job than kind of other companies. So LVMH countersued us that actually the management of Tiffany's weren't very good. In the event, of course, agreement was reached, and they agreed to $131.50 per share. So that's a discount of about 425 million off the original price, which is kind of small, because if you think about it, they basically had slow walked the deal, they'd gone to court, and at the end, they actually said, well, actually, we'll just take a small discount, a couple of percentage points. So what was the logic of the deal? The logic of the deal was that Tiffany had a lot of global stores, a lot of stores in America, a lot of stores in Asia, not so many in Europe, and they were actually struggling to grow sales. And this was despite actually quite strong growth by competitors, including LVMH itself. But high-end kind of luxury retailers have done pretty well over the last 3 or 4 years, and that hasn't been true of Tiffany. Now, LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, has an incredible track record of running luxury brands going back to the late 80s. And they're very, very interested in expanding in what they call hard luxury, which is jewelry and watches. And they have a lot of expertise in revamping tired brands. And LVMH also had the problem of the fact that they used to have a diamond kind of retail store that they were running in concert with De Beers, which is the diamond wholesaler and miner. But in fact, De Beers bought them out in March 2017. And so since then, LVMH has been looking for something to buy. And the thing that they actually decided to buy was Tiffany. Now, what do we know about mergers and acquisitions? Well, what we know is that M&A in general doesn't really add value to the acquirer, which is to say that if you study all acquisitions over the last kind of 50 years, the company that's doing the acquisitions on average doesn't actually have any value added. It is always reasonably good for the acquired company, or rather the shareholders of the acquired company, because there is a premium paid for the acquisition. Now, in general, as I said, M&A isn't great for the acquirer, but there are exceptions. Those exceptions are where there are significant synergies between the target and the acquirer. And it's also true for serial and successful buyers. So LVMH is a serial and successful buyer. To give you an example of other serial and successful buyers, we're thinking about, you can think of things like Cisco. So Cisco Systems grew from being a small provider of internet routers to being the dominant player in kind of internet routers, and therefore kind of the backbone of the internet in a kind of 7 or 8 year period. And that was down to the fact that they were very successful at identifying the right companies and then integrating them into their business. And so serial and successful buyers have actually kind of worked quite well. So LVMH, as I said, serial acquirer in the luxury goods space, and they have extensive experience of integrating these luxury brands. So in M&A, one of the issues is that integration can be a problem, and especially if you already have very, very strong kind of cultures, strong values associated with a particular brand. It's always possible that the acquirer loses the value of that brand by trying to bring it in line with its own values. But LVMH has done a very, very good job in running its portfolio. So, if you look at the number of names that they've bought, and some very, very large luxury brands, and LVMH has generally done a pretty good job. So they bought Bulgari back in 2011. One of the problems with analyzing LVMH is that they don't break down the sales by brand, but it is generally believed that Bulgari probably has doubled in sales under the control of LVMH. And so LVMH thinks they can do the same for Tiffany & Company. Now, Tiffany itself is already trying to do this. They are trying to kind of invigorate their brand. But one of the reasons why LVMH thinks that they would do a better job is that inside that kind of portfolio of luxury brands, Tiffany wouldn't be a subject to kind of quarterly reporting. So a bad quarter here and there wouldn't change the strategy. So what is Tiffany's problems? They've done reasonably well with expansion pre the global financial crisis, so 2008 or so. But in the last kind of decade or so, there has been a generalized belief that they haven't been able to modernize their product line, especially at the high end. And, they've gotten involved in some kind of low end stuff, the silver jewelry, etc. It kind of makes people wonder whether perhaps this isn't the kind of high end thing that Tiffany's generally kind of presents itself to be. And so there is this question mark over whether the Tiffany brand is tarnished at the moment. And one of the reasons why LVMH are saying they'd like to buy it is they think that they can actually move it up market and expand it in Europe and in Asia. In terms of the background to why they've lost their way to some extent, there is the fact that the diamond market has changed dramatically in the last kind of 15 years or so. And one of the reasons for this is De Beers, the miner, used to be just a wholesaler of diamonds. But in fact, as De Beers lost its control over the cartel, they actually moved to settle the antitrust claims against them in the United States, and they actually forsook the pure wholesale business to actually enter the retail business. And so they actually started selling diamonds in competition with the likes of Tiffany. And as De Beers lost their kind of stranglehold over the diamond market, there was a 2017 kind of peak in diamond supply, which has kind of, again, led to worries over the stability of the diamond market. Finally, of course, there are a lot of China-US trade tensions. I'm going to say probably going to be fewer of them with a new president. Okay, so that's the kind of background stuff. Here's some financy stuff, which is how do we value companies? And the way that we would value companies is that we actually need to estimate the future free cash flows. Free cash flow is money that ends up with the investors. Those investors might be shareholders, they might be kind of debt holders, but they are external people who've put up capital for the business, and now they're going to be rewarded with this cash flow. And there is the definition of free cash flow. And once you've come up with the free cash flow numbers, we have to discount this back to present value using a cost of capital. We can come up with this cost of capital using the capital asset pricing model for the cost of equity. And then we derive a kind of cost of debt by looking at what debt costs in the market for a particular credit rating. And then average those two out depending on the composition of debt and equity to come up with the weighted average cost of capital. One of the issues is that at some point you stop forecasting those free cash flows and you need to come up with a growing perpetuity formula for terminal value, which is, the firm is in a steady state and we're just going to say, this is how much it's worth today based on the fact that it's going to keep growing at 1%, or free cash flow is going to grow at 2%. So I've mocked up some numbers. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to work out roughly what kinds of assumptions underpinned the share prices. Pre-takeover, the share price was about $91. And you can see that I've estimated that the cash flows for fiscal year 2021 would be about $657 million, falling and then recovering. And then you can see the perpetuity in the fourth column from the right, which is essentially a free cash flows going out into infinity. And I've assumed that the perpetuity growth rate was about 1%. And I've worked out that the weighted average cost of capital for Tiffany in 2019 was about 5.1%. Now, the deal comes along and the people from LVMH say, we're going to take it over and we're going to run it better. And so you can see that I haven't actually changed the estimates for the first kind of 4 years. So the free cash flow estimates are assumed to be kind of unchanged, but I have changed the perpetuity growth rate from 1% to 2.5%. And you can see that that means that the value of the perpetuity has gone from 13 billion to just under 20 billion in column 4. And that justifies the share price of $135. That's despite the fact that the weighted average cost of capital is slightly higher because there's a little bit more equity in the capital mix. Now, I told you earlier that we're going to justify the $131.50 kind of share price after the renegotiation. And you can see that the expected cash flows for 2021 through to 2024 are substantially lower post-COVID. We would expect the cash flows to be lower, profits are going to be lower, kind of revenues are going to be lower. But we actually can see that the value of the perpetuity remains reasonably high. And one of the reasons for this is that the weighted average cost of capital is a lot lower. Why is the weighted average cost of capital lower? Well, because of the fact that interest rates have fallen. Yes, the expected kind of future growth path is less, but actually the cost of capital has fallen as well. And the perpetuity growth rate has fallen from 2.5% to about 2.15, and that still gives you $131. Okay, someone sent an email to Sarah just before the session started, saying, what is it that persuaded LVMH to back this deal? And the answer is, the shareholders of LVMH think that, in fact, LVMH is going to be able to make a higher growth rate than this 2.15% that I've shown here. So the assumption is that, in fact, LVMH is going to be able to grow the business faster than this, because these assumptions simply justify the price that they've paid for Tiffany. In fact, for the share price of LVMH to go up, which is what it has done, we would have to say that the shareholders think that, in fact, they've gotten a good deal. You've got to say that 2.15% growth rate, it kind of looks fairly generous. And got to say there are relatively robust growth expectations. LVMH is kind of growing. It has been growing its own kind of jewelry and watches business. And it is true that only 23% of global jewelry sales are branded jewelry, which means there's a lot more room for the brands to actually expand. But you've got to kind of wonder whether the forecasts are overconfident, given this kind of reduced growth prospects after the coronavirus. And also, can we be certain that LVMH knows what they're doing? Do they really have an inside track? And one of the interesting things here is that there's a really fascinating little piece from Tiffany's court filings that were made on the 9th of September. So this is when Tiffany is demanding that LVMH consummate the deal. But as part of their filings to the court saying that LVMH should be held to, should be forced to kind of go ahead with the deal, they actually wrote this kind of segment in their court claim, which is basically saying that Francesco Trapani, who was one of Tiffany's directors, was, as he used to be one of Tiffany's directors, one of LVMH's directors, and he was a director of Tiffany. If you look at 36, which is the second paragraph down, they're saying, the dates of meetings of Tiffany's board of directors are not publicly disclosed and generally only known to Tiffany's directors and the top management. On October 15th, one day before Tiffany's previously scheduled October board meetings, LVMH approached Tiffany with an unsolicited bid to acquire Tiffany for $120 per share. This suggests someone is leaking information out of the board. And if we look at item 41, Tiffany's board asked Clary Gottlieb Gottschalk to interview Mr. Trapani to evaluate any potential conflicts of interest. And Mr. Trapani, you can see, kind of decides to recuse himself from the deal and eventually steps down. The implication being that information has been leaking out. Whether that's true or not, it's unclear, but at the very least, you've got to say that one would assume that LVMH had a pretty good understanding of what Tiffany's were trying to do and where the shortcomings might have been. In fact, the CEO of Tiffany's is also an ex-LVMH individual. And so you kind of think that from the outside, LVMH probably has a pretty good idea of what they're trying to do with this deal. In general, LVMH has outperformed Tiffany's, and you can't sit very well here, but after they announced the deal, after they actually agreed the deal, before the vaccine, in fact, the share price of LVMH was doing reasonably well. And all of this suggests that, in fact, people do believe that the deal is value accretive for LVMH, which is to say they're good at their job. So what have we talked about? We've kind of talked a little bit about the strategy of LVMH. We've talked a little bit about the strategy of Tiffany. We've talked about the kind of environment they're operating in. That kind of is the background to the first module in Diploma, which is all about strategy. Module 2 is about finance, and that would be where you learn about the capital asset pricing model. It would be where you learn about kind of capital structure. It actually puts together all the things you need to be able to do the valuation, the theoretical background, the practicalities of all these things. Our third module is corporate valuation. And so rather than this rather simplified version you see here, you get a much clearer view of all the different aspects of how to put together a valuation of a business. And so you would be able to do the tiny little model I showed you in rather more detail at the end of module 3. And our final module is financial strategies of growth. So that's all about kind of things like the operational parts of mergers and acquisitions and other growth decisions. So essentially, it would be asking the question of, how would you go about and what kind of questions you should be asking about a deal of this sort, and how to think about the different kind of barriers to undertaking successful M&A. So all the different modules kind of build towards an understanding of this short taster of the diploma in financial strategy. And I believe that my time is up. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Ken. Thanks for your insights and for providing today's attendees a real flavor on some of the current on the content and issues we explored during the Diploma in Financial Strategy. I will now talk some more on the program itself as well. Okay, fantastic, thank you. Okay, so now more than ever, you might be seeking ways to enhance your professional development and expand your learning with first-class strategic management skills. At Oxford, we are committed to enabling you prepare yourself for the future. The Diploma in Financial Strategy is a postgraduate qualification or master's level qualification undertaken part-time, designed to help finance professionals and senior managers handle strategic issues, be proficient in modern finance and its application, understand the interplay between finance and strategic issues, and as a result, enhance their career prospect and skill set. So it's designed for professionals looking to elevate themselves to a more strategic financial position, such as CFO roles or beyond. And it seeks to equip students with the skills to achieve that. We also have professionals join this program who do not have a finance background, but who are looking to get a deep dive into corporate finance and bridge the gap within their skill set. It's structured around 4 intensive modules, as Ken said, in areas of strategy, business finance, corporate valuation, and financial strategies for growth. The diploma also offers a pathway to the Oxford Executive MBA that includes some fee reductions and 4 module exemptions, which will reduce the intensity of your Executive MBA studies. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so typically the class size is between 50 to 60 students. In terms of study time, we say or recommend that students spend a minimum of 6 hours per week. This is consistent throughout the year. Of course, some individuals spend more than this. At the moment, students on this diploma are assessed by 3 open book online exams. Completion of the exams is an integral part of the experience and the qualification itself. And in addition to this, you will also need to undertake a written assignment of about 6,000 words. This format helps to ensure that you learn in a deep but broad way within the condensed timeframes of short-term study. On completion, there is a graduation ceremony. If you join this diploma in January 2022, then you will graduate sometime between October or November 2022. Graduation ceremonies for all students at Oxford are held at the Sheltonian Theatre. And on successful completion, diploma students are awarded with a postgraduate qualification from the University of Oxford, Said Business School. The diplomas are taught at master's level, so the rigor, style and level of assessment is similar to our executive MBA. However, the diplomas are shorter and more specialized in specific areas. This diploma or the executive diplomas work really well for professionals who want to study but perhaps time and travel pressured and are seeking a deep dive focus on specific areas. Again, the diplomas are not full masters, but they are taught at master's level. And many of you might be curious on how we're going to deliver this next year. We are therefore committed to enabling you to undertake and complete your studies with us in a safe and flexible environment where we offer both in-person teaching in Oxford, if the situation allows, while simultaneously offering online learning for those that are unable to attend in person. Okay, next slide, please. So this is what a typical diploma in financial strategy class looks like in terms of students. There are obviously variations between the years, but the numbers on screen should provide you with an overview on the class you should expect to be part of. Students on diplomas are incredibly diverse in terms of sectors, experiences, and also geographically. We typically have about 30 nationalities and work countries represented in each cohort. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so now it's time for the Q&A with our panel. And as we go through, please feel free to submit your questions via the chat or Q&A function, and we will try to address as many of those at the end. So Madi and Aisha, a very warm welcome. Madi and Aisha are part of the 2018 class. And to begin with, may I ask you to briefly introduce yourselves? Shall we start with Madi?
Yes, of course. Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you. My background is as a CFO. Excuse me, as a CFO. I've worked in life sciences and technology companies for about the last 25 or 30 years, and they're SME businesses, mostly aiming to grow with M&A or funding or undergoing a strategic review. And I was at I did the diploma in 2018.
Fantastic. Thank you, Madi. Aisha?
Hi, everyone. Well, nice to meet you virtually. It's really good to attend this session and feel connected with everyone. So my background is basically, I joined the Diploma in Financial Strategy in 2018. At that time, I was working in the Middle East. My background is more to do with risk management and internal control management. And I was working within the field of aviation. Before that, I was working with one of the big fours and I was training with them. And well, now since after completing the diploma, well, since the past year, I've been in Luxembourg. So I did a bit of a switch over after completing the diploma. So it has been very well for me. I currently work with a private equity held student accommodation provider. So it's quite an interesting space. They're still in the starting up phase. So it's quite interesting to be a part of their journey. So, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Aisha. So I have a few questions for you, and please also feel free to post any questions for our panel using the Q&A function. Okay, so back to you, Maddie. Can I ask, why did you decide to study the Diploma in Financial Strategy?
Well, it was really because it fitted in very neatly to everything I was doing. It mirrored a lot of the work that I was doing, but equally it was about, you know, challenging myself and, you know, and just doing some studying again, you know, and it was very opportune that this came along. As I was thinking about it. So, you know, the location, of course, you know, being Oxford, it would have been a dream when I was younger to have been able to attend Oxford. So, you know, so it was fulfilling a dream, I suppose, a little bit.
Thank you. How about you, Aisha?
Yeah, just following on from what Maddie just mentioned, that it's sort of a dream, obviously, to be a part of this institution, and obviously the reputation precedes it. But it's also, for me, again, it fitted really well with where I was in my career. I really wanted to, you know, grow and have the opportunity to study as well as balance my work as well as traveling, because I was traveling over from Dubai basically and coming over to the UK to attend classes at that time. So the blend between face-to-face learning and taking that coursework back to yourself back home, it just fit really well. And yeah, the course itself is designed in a way that it piqued my interest. The strategy as well as finance blend, it really it just piqued my interest. So yeah, absolutely. That's it.
Okay, great. And so Aisha, 2 years on from completing the diploma, what impact did it have on your career, and were you able to achieve your objectives?
Well, for me, absolutely. It was more about the intrinsic motivation of like updating my knowledge about certain topics. Some of the areas that I really enjoyed were studying the strategy modules, for instance, and taking those ideas and elements and bringing it back to my organization at that time. It just fit in really well with my objective, obviously, of growing within the organization and then finding myself in a space and making a switch over and moving to Europe. So that happened. I had a good network and I spoke to individuals who were able to help me out during that process. So yeah, absolutely staying connected with the institution and everybody around it, that absolutely helped me throughout.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. How about you, Maddie?
I don't know that I necessarily had an objective career-wise, you know, because I was in the average age up. So I'd done a lot in my career before. So, but I think it was very much more about testing myself and proving to myself that I could do it. So for me, it was confidence and self-development. You know, would I be able to compete with everybody else, and would I actually have anything to contribute? And you know, and I did. So you know, it fulfilled that objective, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Okay. And actually, you just touched on your on the network that you developed throughout the program. Can you tell us a little bit more, particularly about how this network helped you during and after the program?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the biggest part of being in this cohort was the network itself, you know, just being around individuals with so many perspectives coming from so many different regions, just exchanging ideas and bouncing back how you can approach particular topics, and especially in terms of opportunities, because I was looking out at that time, at least, just getting people's opinions on certain opportunities was great. We had people from literally all over the world, from Canada, the States, Europe, Africa, South America, everywhere. So just being connected with everyone and getting their opinions, ideas, and obviously taking, certain topics offline, especially when the pandemic hit, we had a few, chats on the group, and then, just trying to stay connected and get through everything that was happening around us. So that really helped, and it still does. And we are still really good friends with so many of them, even till today. So, yeah.
That's great to hear. How about you, Maddie?
Well, completely what Aisha said, to be honest. You make friends for life on this, and I feel so much for people that aren't actually in the same room at the moment. That was a huge part of it, being with people, like-minded people, where I didn't have to explain what I did because everybody was doing something similar, or or understood it. So yeah, friends for life. And we do regulars even today are on WhatsApp with each other.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, Aisha, I have a question here for you from Joe Wright. I think probably you already touched on it. What factors did you consider when making your decision to invest time and money into this course?
Well, I did mention, and I did put that in specific, that the reputation of being associated with such an institution has been phenomenal in making that decision for me to actually go ahead and study. And also, I must put in there that at that time, my peers really pushed me as well to do it. It was on my mind. I wanted to do a master's level program for a very long time, and then just having that push and that motivation to do it really put me out there to go ahead and put the application in. And some of the meetings that I had with the recruitment team also were so positive, and they were so motivating to do it, that I didn't even give it a second thought, to be honest. And when I was there for the strategy module back in January 2018, it was fantastic, and I don't doubt my decision. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, Matti, so I've mentioned earlier that we recommend about 6 hours plus study time. But on average, how much study time did you undertake each week for this diploma?
Well, I spread it out. I didn't leave it to, to do cramming at the end, so I did do some every week, and and I spread it out. It fitted in around my family. I have 3 children, so, I managed to fit it in and around, doing some in the evenings, doing some over the weekends, when everybody else is out at rugby or whatever, but throughout I collected information that I needed for later on. So wherever there was a piece of information that was relevant to what might have become my final assignment, I collected that information. But yeah, it was very much about spreading it out. And one of the things I did was I listened to podcasts and so on while I was driving, which gave me information and doubled up my use of my time.
Okay, that's great. And Aisha, how about you?
Well, for me also, I did spread it out across, say, when we were studying a particular module, we had pre-reading to go as well, to go with the next module, as well as preparing for the current exam that we're supposed to sit. So it was kind of balancing your time between, say, your work commitments, your family, as well as studying. But it's designed in a way, the course, that I feel not so limiting to your responsibilities, and I did find it pretty all right. But I must say that I did come in with some background knowledge of finance from before, so that also helped. And the lecturers and tutors were also always available to help you out if you had questions and so on. So just spreading out your studies between tranches or before actually studying for the course really helped me. Yeah.
Okay, that's very useful, thank you. Okay, back to you, Maddie. What was the highlight of your time here in Oxford?
And the friends that we made, and being in Oxford, I have to say, getting my brain going again and studying was brilliant. But the highlight absolutely is the friendships that we made, and the opportunity.
Okay, no, thank you. Actually, I also have an interesting question here from one of the attendees. So I'm interested to know how you found going back to take exams after having not studied for some years.
Well, taking exams was something of an experience at Oxford itself, because there is a different approach towards taking exams firstly. So we were all, Maddie also must agree that we were also excited to be wearing our gowns and writing exams. So that I must say that that was a very interesting experience. But I think physically, you know, writing out papers was a bit challenging because I had not written an exam in quite a few years. And preparing for that was more, say, the difficult part. Writing it was okay, a couple of hours. If I remember correctly, there was not an exam over 2 hours, 45 minutes, I believe. And that was still all right. And the experience of it was more memorable, of actually writing an exam at the university. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. How about you, Maddie?
Yeah, I echo that. You know, actually writing that amount is something you just don't do. You know, I'm used to my keyboard in front of me, you know. So literally writing and making my handwriting legible so somebody can read it. But yeah, the excitement of wearing the gown and so on was fantastic. So yeah, it was nerve-wracking to begin with, but actually coming out and thinking that was okay. You know, you did okay.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so we, you know, I can imagine that you know, most of the attendees today are perhaps thinking about applying for this diploma. So Aisha, what advice would you give to someone who's thinking of applying for next year?
I would say just research all your options, thoroughly look into the modules and the specifics of each and every aspect of that program. For instance, if you're trying to decide between the various diplomas that are offered, I think going into each and every element of it and actually understanding whether this is relevant and whether this actually applies to you, whether you can leverage on what is being taught and the key message. And then obviously going back and putting that through in your application. I think also reaching out to, say, alumni through LinkedIn and so on really helps, because that's something that I did. I just, you know, went in and reached out to people, individuals who I thought would be able to explain to me how the course works and what they achieved out of it as well. And I think even attending the webinars and so on also helps. And putting in a strong application, obviously, putting that through, having the right recommendations and getting in touch with the recruitment team. So at least those are the key things that I did to make a successful application and be part of the Diploma FS 2018.
Thank you. Maddie?
Yeah, so I echo all of that, but also find different ways to fit it into your life, so you don't become overwhelmed with it. So, you know, I'd hugely recommend doing it because it was such a fantastic experience. But like I said earlier, use different methods of studying, listening to podcasts while you're traveling, for example, or, you know, or out running or walking or whatever, and just collecting information as you're going along, so you don't have at the end a lot of research to do that's built up, because a lot of it you've already done, and that certainly helped me with the final assignment. I was quite clear on my topic for my final assignment all the way through, so I was able to pull that information together.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Okay, so the final question from me today, and we've had quite a few questions about the content of the program. So Aisha, what were your key learnings from the program?
Well, for me, it was obviously about the the way certain messages are delivered and key messages are delivered throughout the course. So for me, the most interesting modules were two of them, the strategy module, the very first one, and certain concepts, the way that they were taught and given a fresh perspective because of all the different people that were involved in that particular, in that module, made it really special. So what I got to learn the most out of everything was trying to understand and being in other people's shoes, be it a project that you're trying to implement or be it a move that you're trying to make, always trying to consider the other point of view. That was something that was a key theme throughout all the modules, you know, trying to understand how, say, different stakeholders will look at the same thing differently and how to achieve your objective out of it. It's more of a, say, another element of, you know, personalizing the experience as well. But for me, that's something that I learned, and I did try to apply it in my professional life as well. So interestingly, yeah, that's something that was a key highlight for me. Yeah.
Fantastic. Over to you, Maddie.
Yeah, and I echo that the first two modules were my favourite. I like the first one, actually was my favourite, but I think actually putting everything into context. So the way that everything sort of linked up. So you started with the strategy and then the finance and so on, and then moved on to the next two, and you found you developed another element of each part. And linking them up and actually then bringing it all together at the very end for the final assignment.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. That's all that we have time for you today in terms of questions. But Maddie and Aisha, we're very grateful for your time and insights today. So can I have the next slide, please? Okay, brilliant, thank you. So as Aisha was telling us about a little bit about the application process. So in order to apply for the Diploma in Financial Strategy, we require applicants to have at least 5 years of relevant experience and 2 professional references. Applicants also need to answer 2 essay questions as part of the admissions process. The first of these is around challenges that you are currently faced with, and the second of these is around their main professional achievements. Furthermore, applicants need to submit a CV and transcripts from their previous qualifications. If English is not your first language, but if you have studied a degree in English or use it as the language of communication in your workplace, then you might be eligible for a waiver. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of next steps, if you have any questions or would like a detailed discussion around your candidacy, then please feel free to reach out to me. I would be happy to set up a call or an online meeting with you. Alternatively, you can start your application directly on our website. The deadline to apply is Monday, the 7th of December. The program fee is £27,000, and at the moment it takes us around 2 to 3 weeks to provide applicants with a decision on their application. Okay, next slide, please. So thank you all for your time. We are now at the end of today's session. I would like to particularly thank Dr. Ken Okamura, Maddie Kennedy, Aisha Mahawish, but most of all, those of you who joined us today. We hope that you found the session insightful and that you now have a better understanding of our Executive Diploma in Financial Strategy. If you have any questions, our emails are on the screen. We would be very happy to hear from you. Stay safe and bye for now.